If you're interested in supporting this work, you can support me on Patreon, and that will help me make more videos and more podcasts for you in the future. Click the link down below on Patreon, or I'll put the link up here in the corner to Patreon, so you can go there and become a Patreon supporter.
Get mantra and meditation MP3s at JasonGallant.ca.
So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about roles, and about how roles can be good and how they can also be bad. They can restrict you. And there is a time and a place for roles to happen. So a lot of times there's level confusion for people. They see that they're supposed to play a role maybe in their workplace. Maybe they are working the cash register and they're supposed to play the role of employee. And then they start to become very spiritual, and then they start to become more themselves, and then they say, hey, boss, man, I'm not going to be this cash register person anymore. I'm going to do whatever I want. And then, of course, the business goes upside down, and then they get fired. So there's obviously a time and a place to play a role. If somebody is playing the role of doctor, and I need a doctor in that moment, I want them to stick with that role. I don't want them to all of a sudden become something different in that moment and ignore the role of doctor, which is very important to my survival in that moment. So where people get mixed up and where the problems begin is when they start to identify with a role that they are playing, and they start to believe that they are the role and all of the limitations around that role. So just because you may do a certain job or may have a certain skill or proficiency in your life, that does not mean that that's the totality of who you are or what you are. So another place where roles affect people on the spiritual journey is that they see somebody that is a spiritual ideal. They see possibly a saint, or they see somebody that is happy or has something that they think spirituality is. Which is where a lot of the charlatans make a lot of profit in this business, because they walk around and pretend to be something that everybody else wants. And then, of course, people will buy that. But enlightenment isn't just pleasantness. And what I mean by that, it isn't fulfilling the expectations of other people. It isn't playing a role. So when you start to mimic what you think spirituality is, instead of being as true as you can in this moment and as real as you can with yourself in this moment, you are imprisoning yourself into another role, the role of spiritual person. But that's not enlightenment. It's not freedom. Playing a role is not freedom. It's obligation, isn't it? If every day I said you have to say certain words or do certain gestures or fulfill certain obligations in order to fulfill a role, that would be a form of enslavement. It would not be freedom. So enlightenment is very much about releasing the infinite that is you and allowing it to dance and play in this reality. And sure, sometimes it will dance and play in playing different roles, because certain roles are good at performing certain tasks, and certain roles are necessary for certain reasons, but you never identify with that role. You never say, that is all that I am. Because all those roles have to do with this physical body and it moving through this space called Earth, or the Maya. So playing roles is fine. But don't believe that you are the role. So this is why a lot of people, when their roles start to fail them, they start to lose the role. Maybe they have to retire from a role, or maybe they cannot fulfill the obligations of playing that role anymore. There is such a death that happens in a human being, and that death will be larger the more they have attached to that role, the more they have identified with that role. The more painful it will be for them to have to let go of it. But in the end, all roles, you will have to surrender. You'll have to surrender all of them. And this is a blessing because it helps you realize that you are the thing beyond all roles. Now, the spiritual role is the most tricky, because you see some people on social media, they're always posting those spiritual concepts. And I'm not talking about myself, but I'm talking about, because you don't see me post too much except for these videos, but the fact is that there are people that are always doing the spiritual quotes, they're always talking about this and that, the secret to happiness. But when they are in their own homes or in their own space, they are horribly depressed. But they're not being honest with themselves about that. They are teaching and pretending to be something that they are not. That is not enlightenment. That is playing a role. And playing of any role, when you get stuck in it, will cause you suffering. It will be suffering to the heart. Perhaps there will be excitement to the mind for a short period of time. We see it with professional athletes. They're excited. They're scoring goals. They're making money. They're popular, whatever it might be. There is a certain amount of excitement in the mind around that. But at some point it switches. It goes to the opposite polarity. And they are forced into their true nature, which is the self beyond the role. This is how wisdom is forced upon us as we age, as we get older. We are known as something at some points in our life, and then we are forced into change. We're forced to surrender roles as we go along. This is how all life is spiritual, really. Some of us evolve faster. Some of us cling to roles for longer and say, no, okay, I'm not this, but now I'm definitely this next thing. But the goal is to surrender the role. You can play the role, but you surrender your attachment to the role. And that's where freedom is found. So it doesn't matter what you're doing externally, what type of illusion you're trying to show the world. Perhaps you're trying to show them how wise you are, or whatever it is you have going on. But be honest with yourself. If you can feel any subtle attachment or need or fear around being a certain thing or showing a certain side of yourself, then realize that is suffering that you must allow to flow within your heart and recycle into your divine nature. Don't judge it, just allow it to be there. Allow that suffering to move through. And then you may discover yourself playing a new role, but the motive will be different. It will be freer from suffering. Freer from impulse, and also freer from the collective pressure. So I hope this helps you on your spiritual journey. Take care for now. Those of you who are interested in taking a formal course on awakening, enlightenment, and healing and spirituality, my teacher, Aratima, she offers an online course, an official course called the Wisdom Live School. So make sure you check out her website if you are interested in taking some sort of formal training, and it's at aratima.com. And those of you who aren't familiar with Aratima, I did write a book about my experiences with her called Awakening with Aratima. So make sure you check that out. That's how my whole spiritual journey began many years ago. Offering many of these videos on podcasts, so make sure you subscribe on Google Play or iTunes to the podcast. If you do like my videos, if you do like my podcast, make sure you leave a review on iTunes or Google Play, and that will help me get my message out there and help more people. So thanks a lot.